There are 15 major characters who were taken off the board, some brutally, some quietly, but none without consequences. This is every major Criminal Minds death, explained. She was never part of the BAU, but Hayley Hotchner's death was one of the most devastating moments in Criminal Minds. Not because of how she died, but because of what it did to the man who loved her. Hayley was Hotch's wife, and for a long time, the only part of his life untouched by darkness. But his work kept pulling him further away, until the danger finally followed him home. In Season 5, the Reaper finds Hayley. He tricks his way into her location, calls Hotch, and makes her say goodbye. Then, with Hotch listening on the phone, he shoots her. That moment broke something in Hotch. He didn't just lose his wife, he lost the one person who reminded him who he was outside of the job. After that, he wasn't the same. Hayley's death wasn't just a turning point for Hotch, it was a message to the audience. No one in this show is safe, not even the ones waiting at home. Hotch never fully recovered from Hayley's death, but he wasn't the first team member to lose everything. Years earlier, Jason Gideon walked a path that would end in silence and regret. He was the original mind behind the BAU, calm, brilliant, and deeply human. But Jason Gideon's end didn't come in a blaze of action. It came quietly and off-screen. After leaving the team in Season 3, Gideon disappears from the series. Years later, in Season 10, we learn he was murdered in his cabin by a serial killer he once profiled. There's no dramatic showdown, just a cold scene, his old friend Rossi finding his body, a chessboard still set, a life unfinished. Gideon's death hit hard, not just because of what he meant to the team, but because of what he symbolised. He was the heart of the early BAU, and his loss reminded us how easily the past can catch up even to the best. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it left a mark that never really went away. Gideon's past caught up with him, but Reid's future was stolen before it even began. Her name was Maeve, and her death left Reid shattered. She was the one bright thing in Spencer Reid's life. Someone who saw past the genius, past the profiler, and just saw him, and then she was gone. Maeve Donovan was never a BAU agent. She was a geneticist, smart, thoughtful, and kind. Her connection with Reid started over the phone. They never met in person for months, but he fell in love with her voice, her mind, her quiet understanding. When they finally do meet, it's under the worst possible circumstances. In Season 8, Maeve is kidnapped by a stalker obsessed with her. Reid races to save her, but he's too late. The killer forces a standoff and shoots Maeve right in front of him. For Reid, it was more than just heartbreak. It was trauma. The one person he let in was taken from him before he ever really had her. Maeve's death changed Reid forever. It hardened him, haunted him, and reminded us that in Criminal Minds, love isn't always a safe place. Reid lost someone he never got to keep. But even the people leading the BAU weren't safe. Erin Strauss may have worn a badge of authority, but her end came with no protection. She started as their boss, maybe even their enemy, but by the time Erin Strauss died, she had earned the team's respect and something close to their trust. Strauss was the section chief of the FBI's Behavioural Analysis Unit. She clashed with Hotch, questioned their methods and pushed back against their decisions. But over time, we saw more than just a bureaucrat. We saw someone who cared. In Season 8, her past catches up to her. The Replicator, a copycat killer obsessed with the team, poisons her, and she dies alone in a hotel room. No heroics, no goodbye. Her death shook the team, especially Rossi. The two had grown close, and her murder turned their investigation into something personal. Strauss's arc reminded us that no one is just their title, that behind the rules and ranks are people with stories, regrets and vulnerabilities, and sometimes they die without redemption. Strauss's death shook the upper ranks, but sometimes it's the newest team members who pay the price. Stephen Walker never even got the chance to settle in. He wasn't with the team for long, but Stephen Walker's death was a punch to the gut, because it came out of nowhere. Walker joined the BAU in Season 12. A former spy with strong instincts, quiet confidence and a good heart, he fit in quickly. But just as the audience started getting to know him, he was gone. At the start of Season 13, we learn Walker died in a car crash, one orchestrated by the team's enemy, Mr. Scratch. It's off-screen, sudden and brutal. The team is shaken. There's no final moment, no last case, just the echo of a life cut short. His death wasn't just a plot twist, it was a reminder of how dangerous their world is. Even off the clock, even when you're just driving home, the job can still get you killed. Walker's death was quick and off-screen, but some deaths leave ripples that last for seasons. Which of these deaths has left a mark on you so far? Drop a comment and let me know. If you enjoyed the video so far, consider dropping a like and subscribing. Ellie Greenway's story changed with one trigger pull and one fatal mistake. Elle Greenway was one of the original BAU agents, tough, sharp and fiercely committed. But one case pushed her past the edge and changed her forever. In Season 1, Elle is shot in her own home by a suspect named Lee, a serial rapist she'd helped profile. She survives the attack, but it leaves more than just scars. It leaves anger, doubt, trauma. When Lee is released due to lack of evidence, Elle snaps. She tracks him down, confronts him, and kills him. No arrest, no trial, just one bullet and one decision she can't undo. His death marked the beginning of the end for Elle. She lies about what happened, pulls away from the team, and eventually quits. Lee's death wasn't just about justice. It was about what happens when the job stops being a job and starts consuming who you are. Elle broke the rules to deliver justice, but one killer rewrote the rules entirely. George Foyer didn't just kill, he destroyed. He wasn't just a killer, he was a phantom. George Foyer, better known as the Reaper, was one of the most chilling unsubs the BAU ever faced, and he made it personal. Foyer first appears in Season 4. He's a calculated, manipulative killer who disappeared for years, only to resurface with a mission: to torment Aaron Hotchner. He invades Hotch's home, nearly beats him to death, and later tracks down and murders Hotch's ex-wife, Hayley, while their son hides in a closet. That moment, listening to Hayley die over the phone, breaks something in Hotch. But in Season 5, Hotch finds him. Foyer comes prepared, even wearing a bulletproof vest. It doesn't matter. Hotch doesn't just arrest him, he tackles him and beats him to death with his bare hands. No badge, no backup, just rage, grief, and a father who lost everything. He wasn't just a killer, he was the embodiment of emptiness. Frank Breitcoff didn't kill for pleasure or power, he killed because nothing else meant anything. Introduced in Season 2, Episode 13, No Way Out, Frank is one of the most prolific serial killers the BAU ever faced. He drifted across the country for decades, targeting the vulnerable and forgotten. No pattern, no remorse, just death. But what made Frank terrifying wasn't just the body count, it was how calm he was, how untouchable he seemed, even when Gideon confronted him face to face. In a rare return, Frank reappears in the Season 2 finale, No Way Out 2. He kidnaps Gideon's girlfriend Sarah and murders her off-screen, a direct attack on the profiler who tried to stop him. Cornered in the end, Frank chooses not to run. Instead, he kills himself and his twisted partner Jane by stepping in front of a train. Frank ended in tragedy, but the next unsub brought fear to an entire city. Billy Flynn turned darkness into his hunting ground. He hunted at night, struck without warning, and disappeared before anyone could scream. Billy Flynn didn't want control. He wanted fear. That's why they called him the Prince of Darkness. Flynn appears in the Season 5 finale and Season 6 premiere, The Longest Night. He's a serial killer who thrives during blackouts in Los Angeles, sneaking into homes, killing parents and abducting children, all while carrying a flashlight and a shotgun. He holds an entire city hostage. But what makes him even more disturbing is how calmly he does it, like it's routine. He kidnaps a woman named Ellie and taunts the BAU, especially Morgan, who takes the lead on the case. The team eventually finds Flynn holding Ellie at gunpoint. In a tense standoff, Morgan shoots and kills him. Flynn's death brought the nightmare to an end, but it also revealed how fragile safety really is. He struck in the dark, when people were most vulnerable, and for Morgan, killing him wasn't just stopping a monster, it was protecting a child from becoming another victim like he once was. Flynn was stopped by a bullet, but not every death comes from violence. David Rossi lost the one person who made him feel human, and she never saw it coming. She wasn't a profiler, and she didn't chase monsters. But Crystal Richards was the person who brought David Rossi peace, and when she died, that peace disappeared with her. Crystal was Rossi's third wife, and the one he reunited with later in life. She was calm, witty, and unafraid to call him out. In a world full of trauma and chaos, she was his normal, But in Criminal Minds, Evolution Season 1, that normal vanishes. We learn Crystal has died, not by violence, not by an unsub, but quietly off-screen, between seasons. The show doesn't dramatise her death with a case or a crime scene. Instead, we see the aftermath. Rossi is shattered. He throws himself into work, isolates himself from the team, and begins seeing Crystal in hallucinations, a sign that grief is tearing him apart from the inside. Crystal's death wasn't about shock value. It was about what happens when the one thing keeping you grounded is suddenly gone. And for a man who spent decades inside the darkest mines, it may be the one loss he never truly recovers from. Crystal grounded Rossi, and for JJ, that role belonged to Will, until the day her anchor simply disappeared. For years, he was the steady force behind JJ, the one who waited at home, raised their kids, and loved her through all the darkness. William Lamont Jr didn't carry a gun with the BAU, but he carried the weight of loving someone who did. Will, JJ's husband, was first introduced back in Season 2. A New Orleans detective with a good heart, he and JJ built a life together through marriage, children, and the relentless stress of her job. For a long time, he was her safe place. But in Criminal Minds, we learn that Will has died unexpectedly from a brain aneurysm. No warning, no dramatic farewell, just gone. The news devastates JJ. She's left trying to stay strong for their sons while silently breaking inside. For someone used to solving murders, there's nothing harder than losing someone you couldn't save. Will's death wasn't part of a case. It wasn't a villain or a choice. It was just life. Cruel, sudden, and real. And for JJ, it's a new kind of grief. The kind you carry quietly, every single day. Some deaths are sudden, but others haunt you for years. For Spencer Reid, Tobias Hankle was more than a killer. He was a scar. He wasn't just a killer, he was 3 people in one broken body. Tobias Hankle was the man who fractured Spencer Reid's mind and nearly ended his life. Introduced in Season 2, Hankle is a deeply disturbed unsub suffering from dissociative identity disorder. One of his personalities is his abusive fundamentalist father, and it's that persona that drives the killings. He kidnaps Reid and subjects him to days of psychological and physical torture, forced injections, filmed abuse, and a countdown to death. But it's not just a test of survival, it's the moment that scars Reid for years to come. In the end, Reid manages to break free and shoots Tobias to save himself. It's one of the few times we see him kill, and it's clear the weight of that act never leaves him. Tobias's death wasn't a victory, it was trauma, a turning point that marked the beginning of Reid's struggles with PTSD and addiction.